second. Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, John. I don't know if anybody else is going to come. Father, do me a favor.
Yeah.
Come over here. You know what else? I'll do it from here. How about I take the hand and move the foot to my house? I want you to see if I'm on, but
Oh.
I put the hand on the mic. It's not going to be very delicate. I don't care. What I want you to see is basically, am I fully visible right here?
Yeah, go back just a little bit. That's better. Right there.
And I'm going to find him. I'm not. Okay. So don't touch him.
No.
Father, look around there. Just see if you see the hand.
The handheld that we use all the time.
Maybe I went in the altar. Here it is. It is right here. Good afternoon. It's November 4th by the church calendar 2020. My name is Father Pimen. I'm the rector of the Old Rite Russian Orthodox Church of the Nativity in Erie, Pennsylvania. What I would like to do is to begin a basic course in the Znamenny chant. I did some of this introduction a number of years ago, but I'm not sure that it's still available. I'm not sure of what I said in that particular series. I'm running a chant class here in the church, and I've had people in various parts of the country, various parts of the world indicated to me they wanted to know more about Znamenny chant. First of all, I want to say that I am not a musicologist, and I'm not an expert in the Znamenny chant. When I was in my young teens, I attended a summer seminary run by the Nastavnik, for at that time we were priests or believers, and we spent a great deal of time during those seminary summers of learning the Znamenny chant, and I became adept at a certain level of the Znamenny chant. Over the years, because I became the rector of the parish and had to learn more of the Znamenny chant, especially how to sing the odes of the canons and more intricate melodies, I practiced more with that and became perhaps, again, another step adept. Adept might be the wrong word for this. As I began to try to teach more, especially in the past several years where I really want to make sure we're having some really classes of some level of not expertise again, but some level of decency, I've again tried to read more, translate more from the Old Russian, and so perhaps again have raised the level of my knowledge of the Znamenny chant. But again, it's very important that I indicate, because if there are people watching this, it may very well be the question of why I would do this, especially since I'm not a musicologist. I must confess that I have really no significant ability to sing Western notation and to sing using Western notation. We put that into our chant books sometimes now as we've translated into English for the benefit of those who really don't have the time and opportunity to learn the croquet, that is the notations, the hook notation. And I can look at it periodically, but I actually find the croquet system, the hook notation system, to me at least, it's much more specific. For example, if I look at Western notation, I can see that one note is in a certain level on the scale, and the next note is either below that or above that or at the same level. But when I look at the croquet system, the hooked notation, the Nuance, I find that I know exactly where I'm at and what pitch I'm at, because it's indicated by the red notes, which we'll talk about. So as I begin this series, first of all, I want to apologize. I'm doing this in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and I wanted to have this first series here in the church where we're streaming because I think the camera system is better. And I wanted to have a dry erase board that I could use like we have in the lower level of the church where we have our educational programs. But I didn't realize because of the COVID, one of the office supply places was out of business, and I couldn't find a significantly large dry board that I could use, a dry board that I could write on. And I had to order one, and I'll have it by next week, but I don't have it today. So I regret that some of what I would like to start off with is not available at the present time, or perhaps a little cruder than I would like it to be. Now, one other introductory point I want to make that I think is important. This parish was formed by people who probably came from the western regions of Russia around the time of the Great Schism in the Russian Orthodox Church. We've learned probably from the Pskov area in western Russia. After the schism in the 17th Excuse me, I'm sorry. And sometime thereafter, many of the came from the Pskov area. I'm going to have to switch to another microphone. That's why this is a little bit. Excuse me again for doing that. So probably in the late 17th century, the early 18th century, most of the parishioners of the various Old Believer communities in the Skov area began to emigrate to what is now Poland, but was then part of the Russian Empire, in a northeast region, which present-day Poland, called the Suwałki area. In the Suwałki area, they stayed there until late in the 19th century and early in the 20th century. The vast majority of the singing was really very similar to the singing that one would find in modern-day Latvia. And I mention that because there are really two types of singing Znamenny chant, what is known as krukovoje penie. Krukovoje penie literally means you need to follow the crooks, the hooks, I'm going to call them the signs, the nuance or the signs. That is a more intricate melody where there's a direct guideline, a direct map, if you will, road map, telling you exactly where you need to sing. There's also the glasovoje penie, which is probably the vast majority of what's used, at least in present-day Old Believer churches and even in non-Old Believer churches. So if one is singing the stiheta in the services, or the tropar, or the kantak, or the antiphons, or the beatitudes, they're simply doing the glasovoje penie, which is simply done by heart. Now, there is a notational structure for that, and probably early on, people followed that notational structure, but over a period of time, it became simply more the norm to simply do that by heart. So you learn what was the tone, and we're going to go over a little of that today in this introductory session of at least how to begin learning the tones as well as learning the krukir, the notations. So we're going to try to do this in a two-part system all the time. One is the more intricate sense of learning the krukir, the notation, the nuance. And I want to make a point here. It's really very simple to learn probably about 85% of the nuance, the krukir system. It's not really very difficult. If you simply look at the primer, and I'll explain to you where you can find that in our website. If you follow the primer and just take a little time to learn those, you'll find that probably within a couple of months, maybe 5 or 6 sessions of this, you'll find yourself really able to sing a great deal of those odes of the canon, of those more intricate melodies, let's say, of the liturgy or the gentle light in Vespers, which are all done by the krukir, not simply by heart. So don't be frustrated and think this is some kind of hieroglyphics that you really can't learn. It really isn't that difficult to become on top of those. So I want to share with you, before I go any further, what I'm going to do, at least today, is I'm going to at least give you a sense of what the scale is. Because there are really 3 parts of singing, of doing the singing of any type of singing, but the Znamenny chant particularly. One, of course, has to be able to read the words. That's the very nature of the singing. The nature of a real chant, not some sort of operatic type of singing, is to be singing the words, the intricate context of the prayers, of the hymns. There should be a melodic background that, of course, should be pleasing to the ear, but the melodic background should not be overwhelming and should not overwhelm the words themselves. So when we sing, of course we have to sing words. And again, another comment I probably should make is we used only Church Slavonic in this parish until 1980. By 1980, after 3 generations of people born in America, it became evident that our parishioners really no longer understood Slavonic, and we had to make it comprehensible for them to follow the services. And we were able to make translations of almost all the services from the old Rite itself, particularly because of the excellent translation and the grace of Father German Chuba, who's done most of the translations. Of course, the translations then had to be adapted to this Znamenny chant. And it was our intention to try to keep the melodies in English as close as we could to the way they sounded in Slavonic. And when we had our church meetings that were very controversial and we were making the transition from Slavonic to English, one of the things we tried to convince our parishioners is many of the hymns, Christos Voskres, for example, Christ is risen, or Christos Rождається, Christ is born, the odes of the Nativity, which is the feast of our parish, the patronal feast of the parish, we could do it in English and the sounds would be very similar. You wouldn't have a great melodic difference in doing that. So we began that process with the adaptation, using the English language, but then trying to follow as closely as we could the very melodic pattern that was used in the Old Church Slavonic, and we were able to do that almost entirely, and thankfully to my brother, who Father Deacon Mitrofan Simon, who had a great skill in this, probably had a greater skill, or does have a greater skill than I had in the Znamenny chant itself, and I don't think I could have ever did what he did. Again, I'm only doing this because there is only one or two other people who could speak to you in English, explain to you in English, and are using English. There are many experts of this in the Church Slavonic and Russia and other parts of the world, perhaps, where there are other old ritualists, particularly up in Oregon, Alaska, Romania, and many other countries, who would certainly be much more qualified and much better to teach, but they're not fluent in English and they're not using English, and that's why I'm doing it. So the last introductory point I want to make is, when our parishioners again began well, I shouldn't say began, continue to use this Znamenny chant, even as they moved from Pskov area to Suwałki and then to America, their melodic patterns, their singing patterns, were very similar to what one would find in Latvia. A number of years ago, I believe in 1999, at that time, Father John Beresins, now Bishop John Beresins, my daughter Daria and I went to Latvia for a week and spent a week with the Priests of Soul Believers in Riga. When we did and went to the daily services, it was evident to us that their singing patterns, their following of the different tones, was almost exactly the same as ours, or I probably should say ours were the same as theirs. Now, the reason I raise that to you is because even when we had a group of parishes in the United States of Priests of Soul Believers of the Pomorce Concord, that's what we came from, the Pomorce, old Priests of Soul Believers. If I went to Marianna, which is south of Pittsburgh or Detroit or even Millville, New Jersey, sometimes I found that I had some difficulty singing with them because their patterns of singing, especially the ones they knew by heart, had already at least deviated, or however you would, we deviated, they deviated, whatever the case might be. We were not exactly the same, and it would be difficult to sing with them, and they were the closest old ritualists or old believers we had to us. So it was quite remarkable when we went in 1999 and found that we were singing almost exactly like in Riga. But then I probably should say that our nastavnik for many years, our nastayato, the rector and nastavnik as well, was from Latvia Erie. His wife was specifically, Matushka Vera was specifically from Riga. So I guess it would not be that surprising that as he spent many years here, even though he came trying to follow the patterns of people, the way people were singing, his influence, because he was the lead singer, would certainly have had an effect over a period of time, and I think it did. One other point I need to make about the singing itself. There was an older system used with the Church Slavonic called Naonnoye Penye. Naonnoye Penye came from the fact that over a period of time, the silent hard, the tvyordiznak, and the silent soft, the myakiznak, lost what probably were half vowel sounds. So if you're familiar with Slavonic at all and you sing a song like Otverzu usta moja, or Volnoyo morskoyo, or Christos rождается, when those silent notes, the silent hard and the silent soft, lost their half vowel sounds, they were replaced with either the letter O or the letter Ye, because they had been written earlier, in a much earlier time, when those silent hard and silent soft had a vowel sound and already had musical notations above them. So in order to avoid having to reinvent the songs altogether, there was simply the insertion of the letter O instead of the tvyordiznak, the silent hard, or the letter Ye instead of the myakiznak. So when we are singing a good number of songs, for example, Otverzu usta moja, we would sing it Otto verzu usta moja, or we would sing, on the other hand, Volnoyo, not morskoyo, but Volnoyo moreskoyo, or Christos rождается. So there's another distinction between old ritualists using Znamenny chant. The Belokranitsa hierarchy, that is the priesthood old believers who were quite large in numbers in Russia, used what's called the Narechny Penye, which means their hymny, the penye, the singing, is closer to the natural speech of the time, where ours is a more ancient form, but it's a little deviated from the speech patterns that you would find now. They follow the speech patterns of earlier. So there's a number of things that I wanted to indicate as the first steps of this. I'd like to share with you just a couple of things that I think are worth reading here that will be helpful too, especially as I'm going to, what I would at least like to start today is to at least show you the scale. So again, I began to say there are three parts to singing. I must know the words. And for many years in our parish, we continue to teach our young children Slavonic, primarily because we were not reading much in Slavonic anymore, but we were singing and still sing a great number of the odes of the canons and so forth in Slavonic. If they're not able to read the words quite fluently, then they're not going to be able to sing because, again, there's 3 parts to being able to sing the Znamenny chant. One is I have to read the words, although I really should be more specific to say we don't really sing words, we sing syllables. So there are notations for each syllable. So if we are singing, for example, as we've now translated Odverzu Znamenny to I shall open my mouth, I have to realize I'm going to have notation on I shall open my mouth. So I have to have notations on all of those various syllables. So in the first instance, if you have trouble reading the words or syllables, you're going to really have difficulty trying to follow the rest because your eyes really have to focus on 3 things. I have to focus on the word or the syllable, and hopefully that's very easy for me if the language is my language, the language I'm used to doing. Secondly, I have to focus on the nuance. We're going to begin talking about the nuance in our next session here, which we'll do 2 weeks from now. I'm going to do these every 2 weeks. Of course, this can be recorded, and you can do it at your own leisure. But I'm combining this with practical chant practices that we're having with our own choir members after I've done this streaming part for those who are just beginning, the beginning stages of learning Znamenny chant. We're working with our choir in more intricate because they already know those elementary parts of the singing. So I've got to look at the syllable. I've got to know and to recognize the neume, N-E-U-M-E. In all chant, even in Western chant, even in Gregorian chant, before there was staff notation, there were neumes. In Byzantine chant, the same thing. The neumes indicated how long you held a note on a syllable, how many notes there were on that syllable, and if there were more than 1 note on that syllable, what direction did the notes go? Did they go up? Did they go down? And one of the things I'm going to suggest to you is you will find on our website, I'm going to indicate to you exactly, you will find on our website the primer that we have used in this parish for, let's say, the past 60 or 70 years. It was compiled by my mentor, Nastavnik Vladimir Smolikov, who was here from 1952 to 1973, was really excellent in his knowledge and ability to use this Znamenny chant. And I think it's really excellent because he did it in a manner almost saying, you are learning your ABCs. He didn't start to get into intricate melodies or intricate neumes until he gave you the most simple ones. So what he did in this primer, and what I'm going to do in these sessions also, is use his primer with the idea that first of all you need to know how to learn the 1-note neumes. That means there's only going to be 1 note on a particular syllable being sung. So if I'm going to sing something like, let's say it's Christ is born. If I'm going to sing Christ is born, I'm going to have 1 note on that word Christ. Later on, there are neumes that may indicate I'm going to have 2 notes. I could have 2 notes going up, and it might be something like Christ, or 2 notes going down and going Christ. And there can even be 3 notes going up, Christ. So we'll take a look from 1-note neumes to 2-note neumes to 3-note neumes, and then some of the more intricate ones that really are the last stage of being able to be somewhat adept in learning this Znamenny chant. So again, know how to read the words or syllables. We make sure that we don't try to teach our children to do this until they're really fluent in reading. Again, we had them try to get fairly fluent in the Slavonic. Once we've now come into the English as almost the dominant or completely dominant language in the church, we make sure, of course, that they can read English fluently so they're not struggling reading the words. Then one must learn the neumes, and that's probably the most intricate part of this learning process. And then thirdly, one has to know what notes are being sung on those neumes. Now, until about the 1600s, in the Russian church, there were not specific notes. There were ranges. So the neumes would be sung on a syllable with a particular range, that is, being in a low range of notes, a low middle section of notes, a high middle section of notes, and then high notes. One knew that I was in that general area, and to a great extent what simply happened, it was passed on from generation to sing, and so I could look at that and say, okay, I'm in that range. I don't know exactly what the exact pitch is, but I have a general idea. In the early 17th century, man Ivan Shadyrov compiled specific notes. He did them to a great extent, perhaps, following the pattern that was already being used in the West. And I want to read you something about that, how that system came in, because as we begin to learn the notes, which are behind me on the scale, it's important to at least understand where did they come from, how are they used. I'm going to read you an article. I don't know where exactly I got this. I plugged in why we owe our 7 musical notes to John the Baptist, and it says this. Again, I'm abridging this greatly. Modern musical notation was born around 1025 in Pomposa on the Adriatic shore of Ferrara in Italy, when the Benedictine monk and music theorist Guido d'Arezzo noticed his fellow monks had difficulties remembering the melodies they were supposed to sing while praying the liturgy. Now again, I'm skipping a number of paragraphs to get to the point that I think is really critical for our ability to learn these notes. D'Arezzo took the names of the first 6 notes in acrostic fashion from the first 6 half lines of a hymn dedicated to St. John the Baptist in Latin. I'm not going to read that, and I haven't had Latin for many years, and I don't want to really destroy the Latin language. But the first letters of those various words began with ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Now, in the Russian church, we may have pronounced those slightly different than one might have learned them in the West. When I was going to school in the West, in America, I would have certainly learned the scale with do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. But in the Slavonic system, in the Russian Slavonic system, it was ut, re, mi, fa, sol, and la. And again, one other thing I want to share with you, it says, again, the reason it was ut, not do, was because of that prayer, and I forgot here, somewhere it indicates that later on the ut was changed to do. So you would have learned, if you know anything about the musical scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, but we would have ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. However, in the system that the Russians used, and certainly they would have learned it from the Greeks when the Russians were baptized beginning in the late 10th century, whether or not the Russian system of singing Znamenny chant exactly followed the Byzantine chant style, probably not exactly, but a number of scholars have indicated more likely it was closer than we would think at the present time, especially realize also the Byzantine chant underwent evolutionary processes. So the fact that the Russian Znamenny chant system and the Greek Byzantine chant system are not the same at the present time doesn't mean that they didn't parallel each other fairly closely in the early beginning of this. So again, I'm going to try not to make this go more than 30, 35 minutes on any given day because I don't want to lose your attention, and I know myself it's tried to follow that. But what I'd like to start off today is to at least get to the point of the scale. So I brought this up from our lower classroom, and I hope this is visible. It may have turned around a little bit. And again, I'm going to show you this is a good learning scale. By the way, let me tell you how to find the primer. You will find the primer if you go to our website, churchofthenativity.net. If you go to churchofthenativity.net, you will find on the home page on the left where their contents are indicated, one of the contents being Old Rite. If you click on Old Rite and you scroll down to the bottom right of the page, all the way down to the bottom of the page, it will say Znamenny Chant. If you click on Znamenny Chant, you will find in the description of this Znamenny Chant and a little history a place that indicates that you can click on to click here for the primer. And you will find a rather rough photocopy or scanned photocopy of the primer. We didn't want to try to make books and put them out. We thought this was a better way to do this. So if you can do both of these things now, you might really want to go to the primer, but you might want to wait. And when you bring up the primer, you want to go to page 2. What I'm going to be telling you right now is what you will find on page 2 of the primer that you can find in the manner that I indicated. So here is the scale, and of course I guess there's one more thing. When one sings this Znamenny chant, the notes that I have indicated, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, are not shown in that manner. There's not an ut, or re, re, above the nuance, above the words. What there is a symbol that one has to learn that symbol, what note does it mean? So that's number one step if you're going to try to learn any of this Znamenny chant according to the Croquis method. not according to Western notation or square notes, whatever the case is, but if you're going to learn it according to the hook notation. So I hope this is visible. As a matter of fact, let me turn this light on, that will help. It's beginning to get toward sunset here. Yes, I think that will help you. If you can see this, primarily the singing is done in what we would call the normal range. And the normal range here is, again, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, ya. I'm going to pronounce it in the more Slavonic pronunciation because that's what I grew up in. It's more common for me than to go sol, la, and so forth. Now, what you see, however, is there is a symbol used for that note. So the symbol for the note ut is the Slavonic letter, which nowadays, or the Russian letter, the Cyrillic letter, is now generally pronounced g, but in the earlier Slavonic it was pronounced h, like Господи помилуй, not Господи помилуй. So I'm going to call this h. It's not important what you call it. You don't need to know that. What you need to know, however, is if you see this red note next to a nuum, above a syllable that you're singing, you are singing at the pitch of ut. And of course, ut is a low in the scale. It's not the lowest because we have a low scale also, but it's still fairly low. Another point I should make, there is no perfect pitch and there's no perfect place to start singing Znamenny chant. Where one begins to sing any of the hymns is where the golovshchik, that is the person who leads the choir, determines. One of the things I've tried very hard in the church in all the years I've been here as the rector is to make sure that I find people whose scale, whose ability of range I should say, whose range is such that it's probably something that most people can reach. What I mean by that is, if I'm going to look at this scale right here and go, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, ya, and of course if I'm a person who starts off something like this, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, ya, that's going to be very hard if I don't have much low range. And if I'm a person who starts off going, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, you can see what's going to happen there. You can't do that either. So there's a sense of where ut ought to be. And as a matter of fact, I would indicate to you probably, the real sense is having a pretty good idea of where fa is. So fa should be somewhere like this. Again, just as over many years of singing this, I would go fa as something like fa, 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 fa. If I'm going to go fa, a lot of people are going to have trouble singing that. So the symbol for ut is the Slavonic letter h. The symbol for the note re is the Slavonic letter, which is n. Again, I don't care that you really know that. You just want to recognize this. When you see this in red on a song of Znamenny chant, you know you are singing at the pitch of re or re if you want. Now, the dot is the only one we can say really doesn't follow, well, I shouldn't say not the only one, but it doesn't even closely approximate any Cyrillic letter. This dot simply is the note for mi. It's the note for mi. The letter M, which is an M also in Cyrillic as much as it is also in the Latin alphabet, is the letter note fa. And this, I suppose, looks mostly like pi, one learns in math. The pi is the symbol for sol. And finally, the pi with the bottom horizontal line on it is la. So what I have to be able to do is to learn that these are ours. So when I see this in a song, I know I'm singing sol. I'm not going to have this written anywhere above it. So all the years I've taught, one of the first things I do with anybody who's learning this is say, you got to go home now, and you got to look at the scale. And you will see the scale on page 2 of the primer. You'll see it in page 2 of the primer. So the first thing, if you're serious about this, you've really got to come to the point that even by the next session, you can say, I know the symbols for the notes. Because once we start to learn the nuums, if you don't know the notes, every time you're trying to sing something, and you, of course, don't know that this is a re, and it's going to be quite low, and this is a la, and it's going to be quite high, then, of course, you have no idea how to sing. And I can find sometimes when I am singing with choir members who haven't practiced this or forgotten, sometimes they have no idea what the note is, and as we switch perhaps a particularly large jump in range, they may have real difficulty in not realizing where we're at. Now, in addition to that, unlike the octave scale in the West, we have a low scale of notes. And the low scale of notes is simply indicated by taking the note ut and putting a little X on the left of it, on the bottom left of it. What that is called is low ut, and that's really low. I really don't have good range in low range. I go flat very much, and we have to sing especially exaspolarians or feast days ending with really low notes. it's best if I don't have to lead, if I simply fade out, because I'm going to be flat and I'm going to be bothersome to hear. If I take the note re and simply put a little X by it, the bottom of it, I get the low re. So I've got an ut in the regular scale, and I've got a low ut here in the low scale. I've got the note re here, or re. I've got the low re right here. The only significant difference is the note mi in the regular scale is completely designated by a completely different note in the low scale. It's the Cyrillic letter ts, and again, I don't care if one knows that, but you need to recognize this is low mi. Now, if we go up, so really what ends up happening is the three low notes, the three lower notes in the regular scale are modeled again in the low scale. So I've got ut, re, mi, and here I have low ut, low re, low mi. I'll try to sing this to some extent, but it won't sound very good. Now, if I get to the three high notes in the regular scale, I have their corresponding notes exactly the same in the high scale, and the only difference is I put a dot above them. So fa is made high fa by inserting a dot above the fa. Sol is made high sol by inserting a dot above the sol. And lia is made high lia by putting a dot above that. So you can see here written in English, so if one can't read Slavonic, at least how to try to learn these. On the right, you can see this ut, re, mi, fa, sol, lia, fa, sol, lia. Now, I'm going to at least do it. Forgive me, again, I don't have any great voice. I don't have a great singing voice. It was thrust upon me all the years for me to do much of the singing and to do much of the leading, but certainly that's not because I have some great singing voice or great expertise, as I've indicated, but I've had to do it, so at least I can share that with you. I'm okay, I'm pretty much okay on the regular scale, so I would do something like this. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Now, if I go to the low scale, we see a good number of these notes, especially in tone 1 and the odes of the canon. In almost anything in tone 1, we get some of these really low notes. For example, when we sing God is the Lord, Bogospods, in any service, Moleben or Matins, for example, right after the 6 Psalms, we really hit some of these low notes. And again, I have real difficulty, and I will really flatten out here. Again, I'm okay here. I can sometimes hit this, but again, however I sing this, and particularly, I have a lot of problems with my sinuses are bothered by allergies, and so I get a cracky voice, so forgive me the way it sounds. But if I try to do this, I'm going to do something like this. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, ya, ya, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, mi, re. Forgive me. That's the scale of notes. It's called the gamut, or the hill. And it is, again, I decided to start with this, as the primer also starts with it, because you're really not going to be able to do anything else unless you know the basic notes. It's very simple to learn. You've got to take a few minutes and try to memorize them so you know them. What we'll do next time, and I really believe I'll have a dry board and I'll have it on an easel. I'm going to choose to do it here because of the camera we have and the streaming that we're now doing that we didn't have before. But I'll have that, and we'll begin looking at the basic nuance, and almost immediately we can start to practice a few hymns. For example, we have a hymn that's very simple with only one note, Zawutra Waslishach Lasmoy, in the morning, hear my voice. And I'll post those again on the website so you can see them, copy them, and you can be singing that with me. So for today, let's leave that with the basic idea of learning the Krukia, the system of Znamenny chant. But what I want to share with you, because I know some of you are trying to do Znamenny chant in your own places, in your churches, in your house churches, and so forth, that again is the intricate part, the hard part. The easy part is really the glossovoyopenia, that is learning tones that you can simply learn one song of a tone by heart, and you can then apply it to many different places where you have that tone that's not using the krukir, that is the hook notations. So all of you, if you're, I'm assuming that you have some knowledge of Orthodoxy, if you come to Vespers and you begin to sing Večernia naša molitva, accept our evening prayers, or if you're singing the Tropadian, O Lord, save thy people, spasi Господи, люди своя, or if you're singing the Tropad for the theophany, for the baptism, when thou was baptized in the Jordan, O Lord, those are all in tone 1. If I know how to sing one single song, one prototype in tone 1, then I can really sing all of these other songs that are of the glossavoy penny, that is, the hymns sung simply by tone, and plug that one melody in. So what I want to do, again, and I'm going to indicate this to you, and you can, if you can hit this, if you go to our website, and again, go to the contents on the left, and you will find service resources. If you go to services resources and click on service resources, you will find that what will come up is the Tropadi and the Cantakia for the 8 tones. The Tropadi and the Cantakia for the 8 tones. If you find those, and once you do find those, what I'm going to do, I hope I have this here, I did have it here somewhere, is, well, I don't even need this to have in front of me, sorry. I had it here, but I know what it is. So if you go first of all to, and as a matter of fact, let me simply find that and I'll pause for a minute here. My apologies. I had this, but somehow I have a whole bunch of different things here, and I misplaced it. So what I'm looking at is a Tropadian for tone 1. I'm looking at Tropadian for tone 1. Again, if you did what I indicated to you, click on Service Resources, and then click on the Tropadian Cantakia for Sunday, you should see tone 1 Tropadian. So if I'm looking at that, I'm going to look at the first part of the song, and I know that the first tone, whatever song I sing, goes like this. When the stone had been sealed by the Jews. There's 3 notes going up on that way where I emphasized. When the stone had been sealed by the Jews, and soldiers were guarding thy most pure body, thou didst arise on the 3rd day, O Savior, granting life to the world. Therefore the powers of heaven cried out to thee, O giver of life, glory to thy resurrection, O Christ, glory to thy kingdom, glory to thy dispensation, O thou who alone lovest mankind. Now that could be the prototype song that you can use. I wanted to indicate to you that's tone 1, but I'm going to suggest to you something better that I think is a good prototype. If you again go to the service resources, below the tones for the Sundays, you will find the Tropadi and the Cantakia for the feasts. If you scroll down to those Tropadia for the feasts, and you get on the 3rd page of the Tropadi and Cantakia for the feasts, you will find the Tropadian for the cross, for the elevation of the cross. This is the hymn that I would suggest that you keep in your mind and make that your prototype. So if you have found that, you can pause this, so I'm assuming you found it. It would be just what I did with the last song when I went, when the stone, and this one will go, O Lord, save thy people, and bless thine inheritance. Grant thou unto Orthodox Christians victories over adversaries, and by thy cross preserve thy people. I just sang a hymn in tone 1. That hymn could be sung on any of the stichete in Vespers. If you're looking at Saturday Vespers or any feast day, it could be done on any Tropadian in tone 1. It could be done in any Cantakian in tone 1. It can be done on antiphons in Sunday mornings. It could be done on the praises. So if you know one song, one hymn, O Lord, save thy people. And another one I would suggest to you that you can scroll down. You don't have to do this right now. If you scroll down further, I think it's on the 29th page. the 29th page of these Troparion and Cantakia for the feast, you'll find the Troparion for Theophany, when thou was baptized in the Jordan, O Lord. Now, if you can keep in your mind again, O Lord, save thy people. So do the same thing. When thou wast baptized in the Jordan, O Lord, the worship of the Trinity was made. O Lord, save thy people. When thou wast baptized in the Jordan, when the stone had been sealed by the Jews. If you do that and learn one song, one hymn, you can do the vast majority of singing according to the Znamenny chant in this manner. Now, would tone 1 perhaps sound somewhat different in that singing that I've done if you were in Oregon and Alaska or in some church in Russia? It may. It should be based on this prototype. But again, because we've done it by heart for generations, there's obviously something that happens. It's like telling a story to 5 or 6 people and finding the story is not exactly the same. So it may not be exactly that way, but I would tell you that it'd be very surprising to find some area where it's not exactly that way. And I guess what I would say to you, if you're learning from us, indicate you learned the system from the Erie parish, which is really based upon the Latvian Pomorce Priestess All Believers. That's primarily where you would find exactly the same singing as ours. Now, again, if one more thing I might suggest to you, just to get a larger feeling that, if you again go to the service resources, find tone 1, and you will find the services for Vespers and Matins for tone 1, for Saturday afternoon Vespers. Saturday afternoon, not Friday, Saturday afternoon before Sunday. And again, if you look at either small Vespers, if it's there, or great Vespers, the first song goes, Accept our evening prayers. Now again, let me do 3 songs here. O Lord, save thy people. When thou wast baptized in the Jordan, when the stone had been sealed by the Jews. And then this one, accept our evening prayers, O holy Lord. All right? That's tone 1 in the basic Glasovoy Penia, which is the overwhelming amount of what you're going to sing in the service. So even if you felt, I want to start doing Znamenny chant, but I'm not adept enough to know the krokia, the note system for the odes, you can start in this manner. And what I would really suggest, I've suggested to someone I know who really wants to do this, we're now streaming. If you can stream, if you're able to do it in wherever you are in the world, if you're following this, if you can stream at the same time we're doing it, turn on the services when we're doing it. In your own home, you will find, again, on the website, all of those hymns for tone 1 for Vespers, and even the ones in Matins, and sing along with us. You're in your own home or wherever you are, even if you're in some church and you're starting a mission parish, you can start to do that and say, we'll try to sing along with them, and so we can really learn these tones. So where we want to end today is, again, you really need to understand the gamut or hill, the scale, lo ut, lo re, lo mi. Low range. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, normal, middle range. High fa, high sol, high la, high range. And secondly, at least get to the point where you can begin with tone 1. Now we're approaching, I believe this next Sunday is tone 5, so it's going to be a few weeks until we're into tone 1. But next time we get together, I'm going to do this every other week, by the way. So the next time we do this will be the 18th of November. When I do it, I will kind of review this concept of tone 1 and then get you into tone 2 so you can approach that. And hopefully by the time we reach tone 1, tone 2, at least tone 3, let's say, or even tone 4, we get half of those. By that time, if we had some work on this, you might find yourself saying, I can do this, and we're able to sing in this manner. Again, my apologies for a couple of aspects. I apologize I don't have the dry board. Because I don't have the dry board and I'm not in the place where I normally teach, I know this was a little disjointed. I have a number of different things here, and I had the Tripati and the Kantakian, so I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for the microphone, whatever that problem is, maybe a battery problem. So my apologies for that. Again, the next time we will do this, of course, you can watch this whenever you want, but I'm actually streaming this at 4:30 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time in the United States, on every other Wednesday. We'll try to stick to that. Today is the 4th of November. Again, by the new calendar, the next time we'll have a session of this is the 18th of November. If you have questions or comments or anything that you want me to help you with or something that doesn't make sense to you, don't hesitate to give me a call or email me. My email address, by the way, is Pimen Simon. That's all one word. PIMENSIMON @gmail.com. Email me if you have some question or comments or something I'm not making sense. May God be with you and help you, and I hope you'll stay with us because it's really not that difficult. And if you really have a desire to learn how to do Znamenny chant, you can do it, and I would tell you in several months you'll be fairly adept at this and able to carry on services. God be with you and God bless you. Another question is whether any of that came out, because if it did, it's going to really frustrate me.
I don't know, that was good. I mean, you're starting at the very beginning, which means...
Excuse me, anybody watching this, I'm sure.